Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. Welcome everybody. I'm calling to order the FORA Reuse Authority regular meeting. Board of Directors, it's Friday, April 11th, about 2 o'clock. I'd ask Mayor Rubio if he would please do the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Ralph. Okay, next item on the agenda, we'll be going into closed session. The items in closed session will be conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Government Code 54956.9 Alpha, 2 cases. First, Keep Fort Wild versus Florida Reuse Authority, case number M114961. Second, City of Marina versus Florida Reuse Authority, case number M11856. Prior to going to closed session, I'm asking for public comment on any of these 2 items that we're discussing in closed session. Is any member of the public wishing to make comment with regard to these 2 cases? Saying no public comment period is closed. We will be adjourning in open session, reconvening next door in closed session. We'll be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Let's go ahead and take our seats, please. Yeah, great. Perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're reconvening in open session now. John, if you would go ahead and report out in closed session, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The board met in closed session, heard from Authority Counsel on the 2 items that are agendized, Keep Fort Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority and the City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and there is nothing to report out.
Thank you very much, John. Next roll call, Lena. Can I have roll call, please?
City of Carmel by the Sea, Councilmember Beach. City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Morton. Here. City of Monterey, Mayor De La Sala.
Here.
Monterey County Supervisor Potter. Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Lucius. City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio. City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
Here.
20th Congressional District, Congressman Farr. 17th State Senate District, Senator Monning. 29th State Assembly District, Assemblymember Stone. University of California, Donna Blitzer. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Monterey Peninsula College, Walter Tribley. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Leslie Codian. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. United States Army, Colonel Fellinger. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore. Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thanks, Lena. Next, acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. The board has received requests to make the following agenda changes. The executive officer requests to pull item 7D. That's the approved legal services budget line item reallocation from consent and move it to old business as a new item 8D. That will do that in order to provide a brief presentation of the item for more information. The appellant requests to pull item 9A from further coordination with the Marina Coast Water District. So that will probably be revisited next month if it's brought before the board at that time. Staff requests to move item 6A from this consent agenda. That's a resolution acknowledging Pacific Grove Mayor Bill Camp from the consent agenda as a new item 7D as part of consent agenda. Mayor Camp he's in the intensive care ward at the hospital. He's doing very well. I visited him earlier today. For someone undergoing such a serious surgery, boy, he's tough. He looked good. He was very articulate. His wife was there. They had a reporter there and other friends there. A very, very tough individual. He's recovering very well. He'll be supposedly released from the hospital on Sunday, be 1 month on light duty, and then within 2 months he'll probably be back at full duty. So I wished him well on behalf of the board. He's done a great job for our board, and we appreciate all of his support over the years. Unless there are any objections, those changes are deemed approved. Michael, you had a few announcements.
Yes, Chair Edel and members of the board, we have a few items here for your consideration. The first one requires that Hunter Harbaugh join me at the podium. As the members of the board are aware, we have a capital improvement program that includes a number of environmental mitigations. It also includes building removal and other activities. Part of our capital improvement program and our CEQA mitigations include providing dollars to agencies that help us in mitigations. The Monterey Salinas Transit Agency has done that, has been very active in forward activities in many ways. And this is a check for just under $100,000 for MST to be able to purchase equipment that will help serve this area and Fort Worth.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members of the board, and Michael, I appreciate your support for MST. This check will allow us to buy one minibus. It's already on order. We were able to get a lower price by a few $1,000s by getting it in under a deadline before prices went up. So we appreciate the promptness of this, and it will enable us to serve such locations like the Behavioral Health Center in Marina, as well as the other medical facilities and affordable housing that is going up in the community here at the Dunes, and so we're very excited about that. So thank you very much.
Next, Chair, in the way of announcements, I just wanted to point out that our colleagues from the County of Monterey were able to get us an invoice on last year's elections. We had anticipated in our budget that we might have to pay part of that this year and part of it next year because the initial estimates were around $1 million or so, but we're currently working through that whole invoice, but it's going to be in the range of $600,000, which is significantly less than what we had expected it to be. So that's good news for FORA as well as the county. Third item is just a reminder to the members of the FORA board that the May board meeting has been rescheduled from May 9th to May 16th, and that's accommodating the state's legislative session, and it allows Assemblymember Stone and Senator Monning to join us for the second part of our legislative sessions. Also, at everyone's desk or table today, you'll see a Discover the Coast highlight. Eric Morgan from Bureau of Land Management is here to tell us what that's all about. All right.
Hey, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me just a little bit of time to talk. You all have a poster on your desk that is a new statewide initiative that's happening in BLM, where we're trying to promote tourism, coastal tourism, and all the communities along the coast that would benefit from tourism. Fort Ord is one of the select, I think, 5 or 6 communities that is in the statewide initiative. So that poster is a reminder. If you turn the poster over, there's a little bit of information of where to get some additional information. We would really like to thank the good folks over at the Fort Ord Reuse Authority who have already been placing some of this item and retweeting it and putting it on Facebook as well as the video. So there's a Discover the Coast video, and if you have some time and you want to hear the velvety voice of Mayor Edelin, he does a very good job talking about the Fort Ord National Monument. So it's a wonderful initiative. It's celebrating the communities around the base, and it's promoting tourism. So I think we learned quite a bit at Dr. Ochoa's colloquium that tourism isn't necessarily the panacea for economic recovery at the base, but we're going to try to do our best to help out in any manner we can. So it's our commitment to work with you and do the best we can. Right now we have Seattle Classic, which is a zoo out there right now, so our staff is kind of going pretty busy on it. So thank you very much.
If you haven't had a chance to see the video yet, we have a link on our website. On the front page of the website, just click on it. It's really excellent, very well done. The 3 seconds of fame, I guess. Thank you. Okay, next we have our annual legislative session for federal. We're honored to have Congressman Sam Farr here. Congressman Farr is a fifth-generation Californian who was raised in Carmel, almost as good as Delray Oaks, but that. Okay, he served the Central Coast for 6 years as Monterey County Supervisor, 12 years as a state assemblyman, and still wanted to become a congressman. And so he's got 20 years now in Congress. FORA was slated for closure in 1991, 2 years before Congressman Farr came to Congress. He spent much of his tenure in Congress helping our community manage and recover from the closure of FORA. Congressman Farr facilitated the final legislation that conveyed the base's land to civilian hands at no payment to the Army, and has steadfastly secured funds for munitions removal, habitat conservation, water resources, and economic recovery. Among Congressman Farr's many leadership and Monterey Regional Resource Support actions, he was a driving force behind the establishment of the National Monument on Fort Ord, the joint DoD-VA clinic, and continues to be a powerful advocate for the Central Coast Veteran Cemetery. I've had a chance to go to Washington as chair of the organization twice. And if anybody thinks that Washington is a functional organization, you've got to have rocks in your head. To get anything done there requires extraordinary effort. And Congressman Farr and his staff, I mean, he has one heck of a very capable staff. They kick butt and they take names. And when the agencies in Washington don't do what they're supposed to do, or they're dragging their heels or whatever, my understanding is they quake in fear when his staff shows up at their doors. So there's no doubt that veteran cemetery would not be anywhere where it is right now without Congressman Farr and his staff working their butts off on our behalf. So Congressman Farr, thank you on behalf of the board for all your efforts, and we're interested to hear what's going on in Washington. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just thought when you introduced me, because I've been here since the day FORA was created, that I'm the old geezer on the board. That would have been enough, but thank you for that kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to represent this incredible area because we have so much going for us, as long as we take advantage of opportunity, and I think we're still doing that, and it's fun to be part of this team effort that everybody's sitting at this table in your respective jobs that got you to this table as part of this team, and it's wonderful to work with you. I thought I'd just give you kind of a quick update on the clinic that never was going to be. The VA didn't want to do it, and Department of Defense didn't want to do it, and then they ran into that Team FAR that you just talked about in Washington, and we said this doesn't make any sense that you're underserving the active duty military families that are here by not providing access to doctors for the spouses and children, and therefore you need to be a part of this clinic. And it's insane that we do these clinics in silos. You build one for the Department of Defense and another one for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and in some cases in the same community. Why don't we combine them into one? And because of the work of General Gordley, who we're going to name the clinic after, it is, he really brought to the attention of DoD, which we needed as a partner in this, that they needed to participate. And so it took a while to get the site selected, but that's finished. The bids are out to the contractors. The subs will be selected by September. The water conveyance is on track. And I understand that the construction company has mobilized equipment on site, so it'll get started as soon as possible. With the Veterans Cemetery, we will, as you've indicated, we invented this. The state didn't want to do it, and the federal government didn't want to do it, so we come up with a third way of saying, well, what if the local governments do it? What if we do it ourselves? And nobody was objected to that, as long as we had to raise the money to do it also. It didn't come out of anybody else's coffers. Fortunately, in federal law, there's a provision that states can build cemeteries as long as they make an application. And so we use that process, not having to change the law. And just the difference was, how is the state going to file an application when they didn't want to be managing a cemetery? And that's where the work of our state legislators came on track. I mean, we've been amending that law in Sacramento for years, and finally got it to a point where it was workable. And fortunately, Senator Monning and others will be able to find and convince their colleagues to put some general fund money into the project. So the system, as you know, works where the state makes the application and the feds fund it, and that's where we are now. We've had to we've had, in the state law, we had, I think Fred Keeley was the first bill that was passed, trying to deal with, and then John Laird followed up, and lastly, last year, Monning and Stone all took special state law to create the means to establish the cemetery to be built with federal funds. It took 3 separate waivers of federal regulations governing the state cemetery construction grants to accommodate the California law and process, but we got those waivers. The project's on track. Right now, we're in the middle of the design phase. We expect the design to be completed by May 31st. On June 4th, the project will go to bid. On July 15th, the bidding process will close, and on August 24th, the bid will be awarded. So groundbreaking should be hopefully this year, and my dream is to get it done by Veterans Day. The UXO cleanup has been a big federal controversy, not just because of Fort Ord, but for the whole country. We conveyed the cleanup parcels to FORA, and you took over the responsibility for cleaning it up, and you ended up cleaning up ahead of schedule and under cost. These lands are all subject to ESCA, the Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement, in which you got nearly $100 million to do that cleanup. Christy Raymer has been been in charge of that project, and she's done a really great job. But for cleanup of the BLM lands, which are still in federal ownership, it's less rosy. Not so much for the lack and desire by the local BRAC office, but more of a lackadaisical attitude by the U.S. Pentagon in Washington to sort of do cleanup. That's not what they feel their mission is, and they make it a low priority. So I'm on the Appropriations Committee and on the committee that puts money into that account, and we have to struggle every year to, in the Milcon Approps bill, to get some money set aside or earmarked. The president usually comes in with a low mark. We've been able to add to it. We got that account up to $500 million, and then along came sequestration and took a lot of that money. The BRAC account was cut by 40%, and that's a really tough cut to come back and try to overcome. In FY15, BRAC will be funded at $270 million, which is down $451 million from last year. But there is a pot of unobligated BRAC funds that we've discovered, and the Pentagon is furious that we discovered it. We found out that the total is $1.2 billion. So we have been successful in inserting language into the Milcon Approps bill that will force the Department of Defense to generate a list of what BRAC properties it intends to spend that money on and when they intend to spend it on, and not carry it over as unobligated money next year. That will give us some clarity and define the commitment the Pentagon has to clean up these valuable lands. A couple of other things that I'd just like to mention that are not necessarily FORA, but are that you have certainly been effective in making these things work. One was what we call the Monterey model, and for those of you who don't know, the city of Monterey proposed that they could do the base operations support through their city operations, through their public works department, parks department, and all the different departments in the city, to sort of take care of the needs of the Defense Language Institute and the Naval Postgraduate School, since those bases are totally within the city limits of Monterey. It took a waiver that I got done back in the 90s. We call that waiver the Monterey model, and we're able to get legislation in the big defense bill last year to use the Monterey model to go system-wide across the country. It had a lot of appeal. Fred Muir has certainly been on the speaking circuit to all these defense communities, telling them what a good deal this is. The different services take a different approach. The Air Force is really making some incredible use out of it, and they came and just said, we had no idea how much opportunity and essentially new ideas have come out of this. We're very excited. It's the best thing that's happened to us in years and years. The Army, the Army's creating, I think, a whole new bureaucracy out of how to implement it. I don't think it's the wise thing. Each community is different. There's no one size fits all. But the need to sort of standardize it gives the Army some of this sort of bureaucracy implementation. And I'm going to be submitting some new language in the Defense Authorization Bill to tweak to make it more user-friendly. and hopefully this will be something that other communities around the country will be coming here to see how Monterey did it and how we're reusing Fort Ord. Just another side step. You've all read that I was active in over 15 years in getting this really complicated payment schedule that Medicare has developed using market basket research, but they do a different market basket for doctors than they do for hospitals, and they do it in a different geological zone. So our hospitals and doctors aren't having the same formula when it comes to deciding what the pay should be. And we're in what they classify as a rural area. Not only were we, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito County, but 14 other counties, including San Diego County, classified as a rural county in California. And the interesting thing about that is that the formula Medicare uses is the same formula TRICARE uses. They don't duplicate, so they just do whatever Medicare does. So if you have low reimbursement to doctors in these counties, it also happens to be the doctors that are receiving TRICARE patients. So when we tweak what we call the GYPSY fix, which is a geographical practice cost index, that's where you get the word gypsy from, it'll improve doctor payments for TRICARE patients as well. And this is a permanent fix, it's not temporary. And because of that, Monterey County will get about $3.7 million more in reimbursements to doctors. And that doesn't count the TRICARE losses that are probably another 50% or so, maybe 5.5 million in total. And so I think it's just going to improve the healthcare delivery system throughout the Monterey Bay area. More senior citizens having access to doctors, more doctors being able to afford to practice here, and more TRICARE patients being able to find doctors close to home. Of course, this clinic is going to be servicing a lot of the TRICARE moms and children, but that clinic will also be hiring some local doctors to do specialty services and things like that. And the last thing, I really want to thank BLM for doing this handout today. I was just looking at the list here of the 6 coastal public lands that you've saved, and 2/3 of them, 2 out of 6 of them, are ones that I've been involved in. One is the Fort Ord National Monument, thanks to a ride on Air Force One. I'll tell you, it happened just 2 years ago today. I was in Cartagena, Colombia, coming back with President Obama, and the question that they were asking me, well, you know, it's all about jobs. How many jobs are we going to, you have to tell us this national monument. What are we going to get out of it if we declare it a national monument? I said, Mr. President, there's 47,000 bicyclists at Fort Ord right now. Every one of them is about a job, and behind every bike is a job. And he said, that's good enough for me. And we got it done 2 years ago, almost to the day. And then the last bullet on there, the more than 20,000 rocks and small islands and pinnacles that comprise the California Coastal Monument. President Clinton did that by executive order, and putting all of those into a statewide, from the Oregon border to the Mexican border. All the rocks offshore are all preserved, so that nobody can go out there and put advertising signs on them or paint them for some kind of artistic thing, or whoever. BLM can lease out their lands for private development. So we just want to make sure that all those rocks and islands got preserved permanently. So you can take credit for an awful lot of things that essentially have all come about since FORA was established. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any member of the board wishing to ask Congressman FORA any questions? Okay, out to the public. Any members of the public wishing to ask any questions? Okay, back to the board. Sir, could you
Can I leave now?
Well, no, you've got one one more task. Would you care to elaborate on Team Monterey just for a minute or so?
Well, thank you for asking, and I hope I don't take too much. This is one of my pet things. Having been with you as a county supervisor for 6 years, sitting in the seat that Dave Potter has, and then being in the state legislature and chairing the state local government committee, the old adage that people are complaining that there's too much government. I think what I find is there's too many governments, and how do you consolidate them? They're very difficult because every one of them has a personality, has a history, and that history then becomes a lobby of the people that work there. Just look at how the difficulty you've had in trying to combine fire departments on the Monterey Peninsula with the politics of that. But I think that's we need to do in the next decade is to take a look at, do a census of all of the talent and equipment we have in all of our governments and figure out how we can eliminate duplication. Because I don't see any new money being able to come in and just keep, it used to be give us last year's budget with a cost of living adjustment until California went broke, and then it was, we just hope we can stay alive as a government. With furloughs and layoffs and shutdowns and everything else. Same thing's happening at the federal government. So I see the next decade is essentially no rescue money from the outside. It's going to be how do we find growth money from doing things more efficiently. And I had to, in thinking that, I said, well, I got to start in my own backyard. And the military would come to me. Military never came to me when I was a county supervisor or a state legislator, but all of a sudden as a Congress member, I'm getting command briefings at the Naval Postgraduate School and the DLI and Fort Hunter Liggett and Camp Roberts and all the commands, wonderful, dedicated, super neat people. But they didn't talk to each other because they're in different services. And I'm the one that had to go back and talk for all of them. So I got them all in a room one day, all the commands, and went around. There's about 9 or 10. I included the Coast Guard because they walk around in uniforms too. And just had each of the commands tell a little bit of what they did. What do you do in your place? And you could just see these leaders sort of leaning forward. You do that? We can have some help. We need that. Or can you do? And all of a sudden you just saw this synergism of, and so my point was, look, if you guys can all get together, and gals get together, and you can create this Team Monterey where you can share and collaborate, I think it'll help us if we have to go through another BRAC round. I can't control whether you're going to, because the BRAC is all about saving money. And it seems to me the big question that we can't control here in the Monterey Bay Area is whether the mission that is being carried out in our training programs here is relevant to the Pentagon's needs. But assuming that what we're doing is all smart stuff and it's about the future, and I think it is, we're going to have a smart military. Maybe leaner, but it's got to be smarter. And if you want to get smarter, you got to come to Monterey. So the question then is, well, why do you have to do that training in Monterey? Why can't you just move the Naval Postgraduate School to Annapolis? Or why can't you just move the Fleet Numerical to Stennis Center in Mississippi, which was an earmark by Senator Stennis, but it's bigger than the presence we have in Monterey. It's not on an ocean, and the intellectual brain trust doesn't want to move this. It won't go. So the Team Monterey is essentially to take a look at how do we bring all of the military assets together, and what are they worth? Because I don't think our chambers totally appreciate the military expenditure that comes in here. I know I never did when I was in local government. Nobody ever came and asked me for military issues or at the state government. It's all funded by the Pentagon. Well, we found out the Pentagon still, with Fort Ord closed, is spending $1.5 billion in Monterey County. There is no military presence in Santa Cruz or military property or in San Benito County. So it's strictly a Monterey federal investment and a federal mission here. And Team Monterey has done a lot of things, and the commands can tell you just about kind of a FORA or a AMBAG of military, where they begin to understand what each other's needs are, and they're being able to share. We did change the DLI. I'm not sure how to explain it all, but the DLI moved their website from a .mil to a .edu, and that would probably cost millions of dollars in contracts. It would have had to go back to Washington. They would have vetted it through the Pentagon. It probably wouldn't have been very high on their list. It would have taken years to probably get the money set aside. They went over to the Naval Postgraduate and says, we teach this stuff. We can do this for you. And they sat down and worked here with the city of Monterey and converted it all at tremendous savings. So what we're doing is, I think that all of this stuff is about just thinking outside the box. Monterey thinking outside the box. Hey, we can provide these base operations to these bases. We think we can save them some money in doing and eliminate duplication, and they have. This Team Monterey is thinking, okay, I think if we combine, we can share equipment, we can share, and I think that's the challenge that you all have in your communities. You know, there's how do you, in essence, I think in many ways, you got to think about the backroom services being regional. And then while I'm on my soapbox here, one way you guys could start getting some money. Do you know that every one of you have your parking tickets go pay? You send them out of the city. I've got a lot of parking tickets around here, and I'm surprised. I'm sending a check from Monterey to San Jose or someplace. I'm sending in one for Salinas to San Diego. I don't know which is which, and all of them are out of town. And I thought, can't our cities all get together and find one common parking ticket vendor, and you probably get a better return because it would bring jobs to Monterey County. And certainly our university here can find a smart system to create that would probably bring down the cost. We've got to think, how do we look at our services and know what we provide, and then who provides it, and bring it all home and combine it and collaborate and partner, and that's the way we'll grow a really healthier community. And we got every asset in the country in the brain trusts that are here. Nobody can outsmart us or think, look what we've done with land use, just incredible. So I'm really excited because this room really has the doers and the dreamers of the next decade, and I think what I'm going to look forward to is working with you and trying to implement those dreams.
A radical idea of governmental organization trying to save money and think outside of the box.
We can.
Yeah, we can. Again, thank you very much, Congressman FAR, for all your efforts on our behalf, innumerable efforts, especially the cemetery. Let's have a round of applause for our Congressman. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda. Again, the change, we're moving the legal services budget line down to 8 Delta, and we're moving the resolution acknowledging Pacific Grove Mayor Bill Camp down to 7D. Any member of the board wishing to pull any item from the consent agenda for questions or discussion? Seeing none out to the public, any member of the public wishing to pull any items for questions or discussion? Okay, back to the board. I'd entertain a motion,
Moves
please.
consent.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Rubio and a second by Supervisor Potter. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Great, unanimous. Let's keep this going. Keep this. Okay, next we have old business, California Central Coast Veteran Cemetery, CCCVC items. One cemetery update. Michael, take it away.
Chair Edelin, members of the board, this will be a relatively brief PowerPoint presentation to provide an outline of these 3 action items that we are requesting today. There we go. A little bit about the cemetery project overview, the history since the closure of Fort Ord. The original efforts to create a Central Coast Veterans Cemetery occurred right after the closure of Fort Ord, mostly coming from local veterans that showed up to base closure meetings. They came all the way from San Luis Obispo to Santa Cruz. There were a large contingent from Salinas in particular that was very interested in seeing this happen. But all of our veterans in this region were interested in the cemetery. Congressman Sam Farr took heed of that right away and made a request for a federal cemetery designation. We found some difficulties in that regard, and then we wound up seeking federal support for a state cemetery instead because of the proximity of the cemetery that's just over the hill and by the San Luis Reservoir. There was a consistent amount of follow-up during the base reuse planning and EIR process. Veterans participated actively in the base closure process. They also participated actively during the base reuse process. In particular, we received about a dozen different letters, but in particular, one letter from a veteran in Salinas wound up being a focused part of a response in our final EIR for the creation of a cemetery in the location that it is currently being proposed for. There was also a significant number of presentations at the state level, at the jurisdiction level, at the FORA board over the 17 years since the base reuse plan was adopted. And those included a number of testimonies at state level, a number of actions that came before the FORA board, including consistency determinations for local general plans and redevelopment plans. The jurisdictions, over the course of time, contributed significantly to the Veterans Cemetery, not just in their oral and verbal support, but also in providing dollars for the planning process, including helping with the federal approvals for the funding of a state cemetery. Congressman FORA was able to secure, I think just a few years after he began seeking it, federal funding support for a state cemetery. And then the creation of the Central Coast Cemetery Advisory Committee by the County of Monterey, that was really a significant part of that. Earlier, I think Congressman FORA mentioned Fred Keeley. I think actually Senator McPherson created a significant amount of legislation that generated the funds for state planning and for the site designation through the state process. There was also legislation by John Laird that Congressman FORA mentioned. That set up an endowment account and an O&M for O&M and other things. The FORA board and the county continue to do legislative actions at the state level and at the federal level to get cemetery support. In fact, every year for a dozen years, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority had the cemetery as a priority in its legislative agenda. The county similarly had the cemetery on its legislative agenda for about a dozen years as well. The legislation by Bill Monning just a few years ago provided for FORA to be able to assist in the construction of the cemetery and the approval if the state desired that. Currently, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority is not involved in that, but potentially in future rounds that may be the case. Also, we've done major fundraising over 17 years, and I say major because we've done everything from the annual golf tournament to bake sales to lemonades, whatever would generate revenues for the cemetery has been, the veterans organizations have been actively engaged in, and also the four jurisdictions. MCWD provided a lot of help twice in the funding process. And last year in particular, we wound up getting a significant number of loans and grants from the Packard Foundation, a grant plus a loan. We had a lot of local contributors and lenders, and we had the Cemetery Foundation generate quite a bit of funds last year, and especially at the time, FORA board member Jason Burnett and his colleague, Mr. Panetta, Jimmy Panetta, that is, did quite a bit to generate local contributions, which added up well over $600,000. In fact, during that time, the state also considered funding, and both the Speaker of the Assembly and the Governor came up with funds that wound up finishing the $2 million needed to secure the federal grant. There's been some specific actions by the FORA board or the Seaside Council or the county supervisors over the years. I think that says 2005, but actually I think some of these started in 2004, and Jen, it looks like this is the older version of the slide, but I think the city of Seaside's action was in 2004. The county's general plan was 2001. It was also in 2010. It was mentioned in both general plans. There was a multi-party agreement in 2011. I think Supervisor Parker, in fact, made the motion to have that multi-party agreement to defer revenues from the individual jurisdictions, the county and FORA and Seaside, and set aside the land for the cemetery, including the water revenues that were needed. Also, FORA appointed the Veterans Issues Advisory Committee to try to make sure that folks paid attention. Last year, the board authorized the necessary property transfer actions early last year. A few years ago, we received an OEA grant, which we finished up about a year and a half ago, doing the environmental studies and infrastructure and planning for the state. And then finally, the FORA board gave rather specific direction last year, authorizing county and requesting the county and Seaside to allow for the transfer of the property directly to the state. So those are some of the actions. Earlier today, I saw in the newspaper some comments by Mike Salerno about water issues and some other items. I want to make sure that those are clarified a bit. What you're being asked to do today is to approve the documents that would allow for transfer of water from the Army to FORA of 5 acre-feet, and then transfer of water resources from FORA to the state of 5 acre-feet to enable the state to complete its planning and environmental review process for the cemetery. It requires those 2 agreements that you see up above. And also, we noticed that there needed to be some corrections in the Seaside FORA agreement so that it complied with the state FORA agreement in terms of its language. about FORA and so forth. So those are the three things that are before you today. Chair, I think if there are specific questions, I know John Giffen, Steve Ensley, Jonathan Garcia are here to respond.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions by members of the board? Seeing none, out to the public. Any questions by members of the public?
Good afternoon, Sid Williams. You all know why I'm here. I'll talk about what this issue is about. I would hope that these approvals would be granted today without any reservation by any members of the board, so that we can unanimously approve what needs to be approved and go forward to get the water in place and to get the verbiage correct on these documents. We've been waiting for this a long time. I would hate to stumble and have to waste another month because somebody didn't want to do this today. I'm sure I will not be the only person that speaks, but I want you to understand that there's about 40,000 of us that are watching what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, my name is Bill Nye. I've been a resident in Monterey County since my birth, 1947. In fact, I was born about a quarter of a mile from this building. I've been involved with the Veterans Cemetery now for a number of years, and I would like to think that after the 20 years that it's taken to get us to this point with the cemetery, that this will not become a stumbling block. We're going to have to go through the EIR process eventually, but this, I think, is the last major issue to this cemetery moving forward. And I do hope, as Sid said, that you will move forward with this and help us bring this cemetery to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Mancini, I want to thank the Army for this. As most of you know, initially when the Army, back in the 1994-95, a lot of Seaside's water, a lot of water did not come from the Army allocation. It came from Seaside's allocation, Boston Park, and a couple others. And a few years later, the Army transferred 39 acre-feet of its water to the city of Seaside for Boston Park. And I can't remember when it was, Ralph, but there was negotiations going on for the main gate project, which Mr. FORA got involved with, so they could build the community initiative across the street, and 119 acre-feet came from the Army allocation. This is the third time, and I want to thank the Army for sitting down at the table and working it out with them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Mr. Chair, directors, and staff. My name is Carlos Ramos. I'm here representing the Coalition for Jobs, Opportunity, and Business in Seaside, C-Jobs. And we definitely want you to move forward. We urge you to, yes, look at the historical information. The executive officer gave you a recap as to all of the discussion, all of the reports that have been done, the agreements that have been agreed to. Thank you to the Army and to all of the stakeholders that have made this possible for us to move forward. But what I read in the newspaper today was very disappointing. It starts even beginning to make one feel in the community, whether it's an individual or a collectivity of individuals just trying to do the right thing. You start wondering, well, you know, at one point there's questions and then legal battles and then even a measure and an election to items that impact moving forward or not for the cemetery. It's time to move forward. In November, the public spoke. We're back to point zero. It was neither here nor there, nor this or that. It's back to the original vision and plan of getting things done, and this is an important step in moving forward. So please, thank you for moving forward, and we await that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Amadeo from the city of Marina. We've heard earlier from Sam Farr all the work that's come before today at the state level, at the federal level, at this level. And this is just one more legal step that needs to be taken so the cemetery can move forward. There are thousands and thousands of families who have been waiting for the opportunity to lay their warriors to rest. We have many new young warriors that will need an eventual resting place who were born here in Monterey County and in the surrounding counties that will benefit from this cemetery. I implore you to move forward today. Let's make one more unanimous vote. Is a consent agenda vote unanimous? That's great, but let's do this one unanimous as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, council member. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Stewart. I am so pleased about the progress on the Veterans Cemetery. I look across the way at my good friend, Sam Farr, my congressman, whom the veterans community approached some 21 years ago to say, help us out. And he hasn't stopped helping since. What he has done is massive. I highly thank and commend the U.S. Army for stepping forward with their allocation of water, and their attitude is, we still take care of the troops. You are our troops. They would do no less than support their fellow soldiers, and that includes airmen, sailors, etc. But as we go along through this progress over the last 21 years, we've met our little obstacles along the way. People who would rather have a recreation trail than a cemetery. And I begrudge nobody that. But let's face it, the veterans community started this 21 years ago. They've been steadfast in their resolve to get this done. And I just ask you to give out a positive vote. Don't throw the veterans community under the bus. This is essential. Remember, and I'll say this for the last time, you enjoy your freedom of speech and self-governance because of the sacrifices of veterans. I'll go no farther than that. I thank you for your positive vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Jack Stewart is the last surviving member of the committee that was formed 21 years ago. So he's still standing and still kicking. Good job, Jack. Any other members of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Seeing none, the public comment period is closed. Back to the board. Entertain a motion. Yes, Casey?
As a veteran myself, I'd be proud to move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Lucius and a second by Mayor Rubio. Any discussion on the motion? Yes.
I got a question. Some comments.
Okay.
I'll just say to the so-called 40,000 veterans out there, it's not over. And don't take it as this vote is over. You know, I read the paper also, and I was waiting for someone to come up and say what the issues were that I read in the paper, but for some reason they're not here. So don't assume that it's over until we bury the first veteran in that cemetery. So the fight is not over.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize the executive officer to execute an amended FORA Seaside Cemetery Agreement, which is Exhibit A. Authorize the executive officer to execute an amended Army FORA Economic Development to Conveyance Agreement, Amendment Number 7, which is Attachment B. And finally, to approve resolution allocating 15 acre-feet per year for 2 years and 5 acre-feet per year permanently of groundwater to the California Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? We're on a roll. Motion carries unanimously. And it was mentioned about 3 or 4 times that the Army did this. Yes, it was the Army, but really it was Colonel Fellinger. The veterans got together and we were talking about this possibility of where we're going to get the water, and it was Colonel Fellinger that basically said, hey, I've got some water. I'm going to recommend to Washington that water be conveyed over. So, again, it was through his leadership and his pushing Department of the Army that the water came through. So, Colonel Fellinger, thank you very much on being part of the board and the veterans. And let's have Colonel Fellinger. Okay, we're on a roll now. Okay, next. I just changed it, didn't I? Okay, the quarterly environmental services cooperative agreement update. This is for information. Michael?
Yes, Chair Edel and members of the board, you heard earlier from Congressman FORA that we were making continuous progress on the environmental services cooperative agreement. You do have in your board packet under item 8B some specific notes about the progress that's being made. This last week on Tuesday, we met with the members of the Environmental Protection Agency and also met with the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. We have 2 items that are currently of interest to members of the board, and I know members of the FORA legislative team that went to Washington, D.C. I know Congressman Farr is watching this item closely. At Fort Ord, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the California Department of, and the United States Army have, over the years, had questions about how munitions and explosives are classified under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Coordination and Liability Act, or CERCLA, the Superfund Act. And the language with respect to that has juggled over the years, and way back in 1999 there was an action taken by the Department of Justice when this same issue popped up that wound up delaying transfers at the former Fort Ord for about 5 years or so, when the Department of Justice decided to change its method for processing munitions removal at Fort Ord. So the issue has never really gone away, with the exception of that agreement that was done in 1999 that avoided a lawsuit and settled the action with the Fort Ord Toxics Project, or, as you remember, Congressman Farr. We are back at that issue again today, and at the headquarters level, they are trying to resolve a dispute between the Army and EPA on that language. And hopefully the resolution of that will come within the next 45 days or so if the dispute process stays on schedule. I know several of you have asked about that. It directly impacts each jurisdiction who receives property from Fort Ord, the county as much as anyone, because the language will specify how the property at Fort Ord retains its coverage under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Coordination, and Liability Act. Without that, the jurisdictions are not protected. The Army's not required to come back if something's found in the future. So that's the key part of this. So Seaside, the county, in some cases the city of Marina, Delray Oaks, and Monterey all have this as an issue. And so I'll be reporting especially to those jurisdictions, but also to the full board on the outcome as soon as we have that. The second item is we've just finished a report, and it's out for public consumption, about the methodology that was used at the former Fort Ord by our contractors and the work that we did at FORA to demonstrate how we can comply with removing munitions as a risk from sensitive uses like housing on parts of the former Fort Ord. That's particularly important for the housing areas that may be in the future housing in Delray Oaks and in the city of Seaside. And the consequence of those actions are this report. That report is being reviewed by DTSC and by the public. It should be completed and wrapped up and filed within about 60 days. So I know City of Seaside, I know Mayor Rubio has been following this closely, but I just wanted the board to know those two important items are moving along swiftly.
Any questions by board members? Saying none out to the public, any questions by members of the public? Saying none, okay, that concludes that item. We will deem the information received. Next is, The status of pollution legal liability insurance solicitation. Who's handling that?
Yes, Chair Edel and members of the board, as you are aware and as you authorized, we have issued a solicitation for insurance companies to provide quotes for us on sustaining our coverage under pollution legal liability. Our current policy expires at the end of this calendar year. We received 5 responses from 5 entities, very effectively seeking questions and answers, and it's clear that we will get responsive quotes for that kind of coverage, either to extend the existing policy or a new policy, and most likely to be a new policy. Again, this is important for FORA, but it may also be important for the jurisdictions that choose to participate. I know Seaside and the county are fairly active in their interest in participating because of the coverage. I know City of Marina is still looking, but not sure. And Delray Oaks' city manager has been instructed to participate, as I understand. And so we're moving along with the pollution legal liability and expect by September, October to be bringing back to the board an effective quote once we negotiate policy terms this summer.
Any questions by members of the board? Out to the public, any questions by members of the public? Seeing no questions, people, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Tom, please.
Yeah, just one quick question. What's the anticipated way in which premium costs will be distributed amongst land use jurisdictions? Is it by acreage or something else?
When we went into the current agreement in 2005 for a 10-year pollution legal liability coverage, actually 2004, we purchased $100 million of coverage for about $6 million, and FORA financed most of that for jurisdictions who then picked up the tab over a 7-year repayment. We anticipate that we need about half that much coverage moving forward, maybe even less, because of 3 things. One, we know significantly more about the property now than we did 10 years ago. We've completed the munitions removal work, still doing the paperwork processing on most of the property that will be owned by jurisdictions. We also have the experience of the construction that's occurred, particularly in the city of Marina, some in the city of Seaside and the county over time, where very limited claims have been filed against the existing policy. Very limited fines have occurred. There have been a few, but very limited, and the cost was relatively low. So we know that we're going to need less coverage moving forward for 10 years. That's what we're hoping for. Before it goes away in 6 years, we're hoping that we have coverage that will allow successors in interest, like jurisdictions or others, to have that coverage after FORA goes away. We expect that the cost of that coverage will be something less than half of what the cost was 10 years ago because of all of the reasons I mentioned before. FORA has about $1 million. It's not quite $1 million, but we, as part of our negotiations on the ESCA contract, had a reserve set aside for pollution legal liability. We can use that for self-coverage or to purchase a policy. We have used it for self-coverage for the last 7 years. We want to convert that now to purchasing a policy as the ESCA contract goes away. That's probably a third of what the premium will cost, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on what the actual number is. So we'll have to figure out how to either pay for or finance the other $2 million of the premium cost. We would expect to share that depending on the coverage levels that the individual jurisdictions or takers wanted to have. So someone might need or feel a need, let's use Delray Oaks as an example, for $10 million of coverage. That $10 million might be a cost of $600,000-$700,000 or maybe a little less, depending on how you look at that. What we believe is that if FORA handles a single policy for everyone and we all participate, then we don't all have to pay the first dollar coverage for 6 or 7 different policies, but can get a comparable policy and have a slightly lower attachment point. We all know what the attachment point is. It's like your deductible. So in the current policy, it's $500,000. but we might be able to negotiate that down, given that we know more about the property and so forth. So the answer to your question is, we will discover that as we get to find out how much everybody wants, what the coverage is, what the attachment point is, and then how it's best to distribute. But I think it's going to be by coverage rather than by acres.
Thank you.
Any other questions about ESCA? Seeing none, then we'll deem the report received. Last item of old business is approve the legal services budget line item reallocation. Michael?
Right. Chair, we have a brief PowerPoint presentation. We received 4 different questions from board members on exactly what we were doing with this, because it is a significant amount of dollars, and we wanted to give a little brief presentation. The current authority council line item and litigation line items are as you see on the left. It's $135,000 and $500,000. When we created this budget in the spring of 2013, I believe we had just entered the initiatives process. I think we had 8 different items on one of our agendas for litigation. We weren't really clear about what the litigation process might discover during the year, and so we put more in litigation than in authority council costs. We also discovered during the year that our authority council, John Giffen, tends to charge us in authority council charges for things that aren't directly tied to litigation, even if it's affiliated. That's a benefit to us because his rate under authority council is lower. Thank you, John. Overall, we believe that our legal costs for the year are going to be quite a bit less than what we put in the left column. However, because we've had more action under authority council, that there's been more requests by the board for certain kinds of authority council reviews and opinions, we've exhausted the authority council line item, and this is simply to move some from where we know we won't need it into a column where we will need it for the coming 90 days. So it's a line item adjustment more than it is a reallocation, but we've always used that term in the past.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions by members of the board? Out to the public, any questions by members of the public? Okay, back just 2 comments. Number 1, the money you see up there does not have to be spent. It's not automatically spent. We're trying to be as frugal as we can with the dollars, and if the dollars are not spent, they'll be carried on to the next year used in other categories based on the board's approval. Second of all, if you've looked over time, the last year and a half or so, we've gone from about 9 lawsuits. We're down getting rid of the last 2, and there have been no new ones coming up. A lot of that I attribute to our legal counsel and John Giffen himself. He's working his tail off. He's making sure everything we done is purer than Caesar's wife, and by being frugal and by not being sued constantly, we're saving the taxpayers' dollars and being able to use those dollars in areas that directly benefit the board members of FORA. So again, John, I'd like to publicly congratulate you on the good work you've been doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that.
Thanks. Okay, next item on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's an information. Is it information? I'm sorry. It's an action item. Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Rubio, second by Supervisor Potter. Any discussion on the motion? Did you go out to the public? You don't have to on the motion. We had public comment on this already, right?
Yeah.
We did. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously, 3 in a row. Okay. Heart be still. Okay, next we have the Marina Coast Water District determination has been pulled. We are now going to the post-base reuse plan reassessment follow-up. Josh, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to provide a brief update on the regional urban design guidelines process and what we've been up to and where we're headed, and then I'll talk briefly also about the larger Category 3 items from the reassessment report. Okay. So for anyone just tuning in, there's a history, context here for you. The base reuse plan called out the regional urban design guidelines for certain areas on the former base. The first step of that was taken with the board approval of the Highway 1 corridor design guidelines in 2005. The 2012 reassessment identified the remaining urban design guidelines as an outstanding FORA obligation, and then in February, this board approved the work plan that included moving ahead with the guidelines. So since then, we've had discussion at the administrative committee, which recognized the serious value and complexity of this, potential complexity of this task, and so spoke in the committee about questions came up about delivery timing to minimize project review and approval disruption. So among other issues, that was called out. So the chair appointed a task force of representatives from each of the jurisdictions. We're calling this the Regional Urban Design Guideline Task Force, and the first meeting of that group will be Tuesday the 22nd. At the staff level, we've released a first stage of a two-stage proposal process where we call it the request for qualifications, which was sent out to around 30 local and national level design and planning professional firms and teams. We're expecting responses to that by next Tuesday, the 15th. From that set of respondents, we'll select a subset, or the task force will select a subset to receive a more detailed RFP, and we'll go into a much deeper level of involvement with each of those teams. So moving forward, we have our first meeting of the task force, the specification of the proposal, what we're actually asking them to do. We'll then look at those responses, and again, as I described, the task force will select a subset to call in for more detailed proposals, and going through that process, we'll end up back here at the board with a recommendation for a team to work with. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions by board members thus far? Any questions by members of the public? Josh?
Okay. So the Category 3 in the base reuse plan reassessment includes the urban design guidelines. That's the most high profile. And this chart here is a useful one to understand what we're talking about when we reference these categories. For someone relatively new to this process, it's often useful to reference. But the Category 3 deals with the implementation of policies and programs, and at the same February meeting of the board, it was approved to move ahead with bringing the remaining Category 3 items to completion. And in the report, the reassessment report, it talks about reasons for these items being still incomplete, some of which are incomplete because events that would trigger implementation have not yet occurred, and others that are not contingent on triggering events should be implemented as soon as feasible. If you're interested, you can find out more details there, on especially Table 11 on page 332. Summarizes 171 remaining items divided up into the different jurisdictions as indicated in this table. The important note here, just for your information, is that we're moving ahead to, we have scheduled meetings with each of the jurisdictions and are doing so for those outstanding to get a status update on each of those items, and then we'll be coming back to the administrative committee with an updated status list. From there, we'll identify any or schedule any necessary actions, and we'll continue to keep the board updated as we move along. So are there any questions on that?
Any questions by board? Yes. Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had a couple of questions. Thank you for this item. It looks as though you have a little bit of guidance to work with the jurisdictions on in terms of some of the obligations that need to be completed sooner rather than later, and then others that would happen later. And I guess, you know, I wonder, in your reporting to the board, were you planning to come back on a regular basis so that we can kind of keep track, particularly of the ones that need to be completed before development happens?
Well, we can certainly do whatever the board would like to hear in terms of frequency of update, so that's open to suggestion. I think I'd defer probably to Michael and Steve in terms of any input you might have on that.
Yes.
Thank you. And I guess I do have kind of a suggestion that hopefully is practical. Our county planning department has to report to our board on mitigation measures and that sort of thing. And they just create a matrix for it with timelines and, you know, benchmarks and that sort of thing. And it seems to me that in the reassessment report there's a table that shows a lot of these policies, who's responsible,
right.
And if as you're meeting with the jurisdictions, you can work with them on whether they're earlier term completion kinds of items or if what the triggers are, and then, you know, and bring that to our board quarterly or so, just updated as things are getting completed, and so we have a sense for, you know, what the obligations are to our own jurisdictions as well as just the general progress of those items.
Sounds reasonable.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, out to the public. Any questions by members of the public? Seeing none, this is an information item primarily. We'll deem it received. Next on the agenda, again, Josh, good job on that. You're working hard, and also good job on the PRAC. Appreciate all your work. Next is the public comment period. Any member of the public can address the board on any item not on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes. Any member of the public wishing to address the board? Is it sunny outside, or what's going on here? The public comment period is now closed. Thank you very much. Next, we have the executive officer's report. Michael.
Yes, Chair, I think all of the items in the executive officer's report are clear, and I understand that both you and Mayor Rubio reported on the legislative mission from last month, so I have nothing to add.
I would like to report on, I had Michael grabbed me and tied me in the back of a truck and took me up to Sacramento along with another team from FORA, and we were basically looking at why it's taken so long for the Habitat Conservation Plan to be approved. We've been working on the HCP in conjunction with the Sierra Club and other interested organizations trying to protect the habitat for over 17 years. We've spent $2 million. We have $5 million in reserve, and every time we go up to Sacramento, we're trying to find out why can't they approve a simple HCP. Last year, January 2013, Michael just took the staff out without an elected member, and was promised by the, I guess, Department of Fish and Wildlife and California State Parks, they'd get together, those two agencies, and come up and approve our HCP. Every time they've asked us in 17 years to do something, we've responded immediately. They have no complaints with what we're doing. We cannot get two California state organizations to work together to approve an HCP. The sad thing is the $2 million that was spent, we're supposed to have sunset here in June. Theoretically, the entire life of FORA could have gone from the very beginning until sunset without being able to get a simple HCP document approved by the state legislature. So Michael and I and the other staff members there, we gave them hell in a nice way, but we gave them hell, and I think they were reeling when we got done from there. We basically offered to have a cage match where we'd get our organization with the wildlife and with the state parks into a cage, and we'd stay there until we had the document hammered out. And I think when they heard us say something like that, they were ready to be a little bit more compromising. But again, we've got to get the HCP done. Everybody's behind it. It's not controversial. It's just two agencies up there that just can't get their act together and work together as a team. So I just wanted to say that. It's sometimes we're a model of efficiency. Sometimes we're not, but most of the times we are. In this case, it's no wonder California is in such dire straits when they can't get something done in 17 years. Anyhow, enough said. Do we have any items from members you want to pass on? Seeing no items on members, ladies and gentlemen, we adjourn. Unanimous consent on adjournment, too, I'm sure. Thank you.